Hi everyone, thanks for making it. And again, it's been a long road so far, but it's brought us to a good juncture and a good point where we finally have a lot of you meeting in the room together. And I've had individual discussions with many of you at multiple levels. This is basically a good point. Now that we've hit a couple milestones, a good point to kind of meet, talk about what we've done so far, revisit the purpose of TesLA, and kind of take the steps going forward from this. So here's the fundamental tenet or the problem based on which we went about forming TesLA. The industry suffers from a lack of standards, and there are many fragmented efforts to kind of solve customer challenges and customer problems. In terms of these challenges, obviously the challenges are not only faced just by a customer or an end user, but the challenges are faced also by the vendors. The vendors have specific needs and specific solutions that they're trying to offer, and interoperability and a lot of those elements are key, for the entire community itself. The solution is an industry-wide concerted effort, which we basically seen in TesLA, and we're proceeding with that from there. So what does TesLA do? And again, for a lot of you who've probably joined us for the first time, I wanted to basically share really the fundamental elements about TesLA. TesLA provides technology for a unified multi-vendor automation framework that we are all building together, and we are basically collaborating in a manner that we can solve the fundamental challenge around automation and multi-vendor automation for the industry. We as members will not only be building the core framework or the core product of TesLA, but also adding specific plugins, our products as plugins into this particular framework, and extending that automation solution which is in the framework. Going beyond that, the fact that all of us are collaborating on this front ensures from the solution perspective interoperability that a vendor can get out of box when they adopt the TesLA solution. So that was a quick recap. We've been engaging in a number of activities, from the very start in terms of, from the very start with TesLA, and we've hit a number of milestones. I just wanted to detail to you what are all the different milestones that we have achieved. Last we met all together in one room was August 26th, when we announced TesLA. And since then, there have been a number of milestones which we had initially talked about, discussed in multiple forums, either on conference calls or person-to-person meetings. And as a result, TesLA is now incorporated as an independent entity. It is a non-profit organization. We've defined the tiered membership structure after a lot of discussion and a number of changes on that side. It was a living document for quite some time, but it has come to it's pretty much come to good shape, and it's in its final forms. The member agreement has been now defined to be signed with TesLA, now that TesLA is its own entity. TesLA, as an industry alliance, is inviting all participants of the industry. The other thing that we have, the other item that we've achieved, or the key milestone that we've achieved with TesLA is the Composer, and Composer is now available and ready for actually exhibition. I'll put it simply, because we're still going through the quality process and ensuring that Composer does what it is designed to do from that perspective. So that's the initial step, and again, this is going to grow further. This is just the start of the entire journey. The customer advisory board was formed, which is a very significant milestone in ensuring neutrality of TesLA, for all of us. And again, with a lot of input from a number of you and from the customers, we've got a good structure defined around the advisory board. And I thank not only each of the member contributors, but also the customer advisors for their feedback. And the formation was announced, and now here we are with the first quarterly meeting of the Alliance. So a lot of milestones compressed to me in a small amount of time, although it felt like a very long time, in going through it. But it has been a very, very exciting time and a very exciting ride there. So just continue on with the updates. A quick update on the TesLA framework and the Composer. The TesLA Composer, as I mentioned earlier, is ready. we are basically in the process of putting together some plugins, and in terms of that process, we've had some discussions again with a number of you. A number of you have also helped through some pilot processes here to essentially make sure that what we are doing in terms of the definition of the plugin and in terms of creation of easing creation of a plugin for a member. The processes are well defined, and there's a good SDK that exists. So we have an initial SDK which is now in place, which includes documentation, some training, initial examples, and the member website has certain portions of this material available for download for members who are basically beginning with this process. So again, this is just the start. This is by no means complete. The plugin is basically from the perspective of its definition functional, and we'll be basically showing you some of that later in the day today. And just a list of all the partners and members who are basically going through the plugin development. And it's been definitely very exciting so far in terms of the feedback and refining the SDK from that in that area. Quick recap: when we initially met with TesLA, and we basically met on TesLA and basically started discussing what really needs to exist in the framework, we came up with a diagram, and here's the diagram, pretty much standing exactly the same as it was when we started and agreed on the final discussions. The TesLA framework basically contains these 4 key elements in the area of high-level script authoring, in the area of device-level configuration, package content, which would be basically value-add content that goes around this framework and essentially offers maybe device configurations, DUT configurations, and so on and so forth, and other test plans and other elements that would get added on, and also the lab management component that would be basically be exposed from within the framework. All of us talked about the plugins. Plugins as being the key means by which each of us could offer our products, our solutions, to be compatible with the framework without actually tightly binding them all together, and forming an architecture which basically works and is also something which is completely aligned with the goals of TesLA, to ensure that a new member joining can essentially offer the same level of compatibility than an existing member who's already built a plugin from that perspective. So with that, what we went ahead and defined is extensions and plugins, and I'll touch on these just a little bit to kind of define these in particular. The way and again, there was a lot of discussion around it, but again, to kind of get the definitions clear and go through that, a plugin basically is the capability that you're adding on top of the script authoring component. It is basically the application that is being built upon the OS. To draw an analogy there, you have a base operating system in the framework, in the composer, and the plugin is essentially being drawn. The plugin is essentially being drawn up as the application that gets built on top of this particular framework. Beyond that, there are other elements which we are calling extensions here, and these elements are offering additional capabilities in the other 3 areas of the framework offering. And again, in the way it stands today. Composer, and just to add in, Composer is going to be demonstrated later in the day today. Composer, as it stands today, is the right half of this particular of the particular circle. The left half is not fully in place yet, and again, we are still working through a lot of those elements there, and we'll be talking about some efforts in that area in terms of the committees and the efforts from the membership, and we'll also be taking a look at Composer and how in many different ways it can be extended further. Any questions so far? Just taking a quick look at the TesLA architecture. So the composer forms the base of this entire architecture. What we've done here, and again as a representation, taken that circle, flipped it sideways, and we're looking at it laterally in terms of the composer forming the basis of the entire architecture. And it would get extended as we go forward because of additional capabilities being offered into it. Building upon top of that as a TesLA plugins, where we'll be basically adding additional plugins from each of our from within each of our efforts and our contributions into and participation within TesLA. Then come in these TesLA extensions, which would add on additional capabilities from the perspective of extending the capabilities of the composer. And finally, come in additional extensions which could be offered by specific members in, and these extensions would either be, could be full-fledged infrastructure products or infrastructure elements that could be extending this core capability that the TesLA Alliance is basically building. With that, I mean, I kind of wanted to just take a quick recap, and we've had discussions on this side, which I just wanted to make sure we take a quick recap of the architecture and get a good understanding.